You know, it's interesting. This Lori Laitman's The Scarlet Letter actually was commissioned by the University of
Central Arkansas.
Back in 2007-ish.
Yes, for a 2008 performance.
For a 2008 performance done by college-age students and an orchestra at the university. Can you tell me a little bit about how does that commission happen?
Yeah,
you know, do they give you the subject matter,
No.
or and then if not, then how do you go about picking that perfect subject for an opera?
Okay. So in 2006, I was representing the United States in a song festival that featured composers from the United States and South America. Every other year, they held it in South America. Well, every alternate year, they held it in South America. The year I was chosen, they held it in Arkansas. But that's how the Scarlet Letter came about. Because they were presenting several concerts of my music, and Robert Holden, he was a wonderful baritone on the faculty there, and he was singing my setting of David Mason's Swimmers on the Shore, and he loved it, and he loved my music, and he said, gee, we have this great new dean, and would you write an opera for us? And I said, okay, you know. What happened was I had a lot of people waiting for my song, so I said, I really, you know, I can do this, but I can't produce anything until the 2009 season. They said, okay, and then a couple of months later, they called me and they said, you know, we really need it for 2008, and not only that, but in order to get grant money, we have to submit the grant in 10 days, and so we need your title. So, what? So, fortunately, by this time, I had actually asked Dave if he would be my librettist, and fortunately, he said yes, so that was great, because I was thinking of a couple of different people, but nobody better than David Mason. Telling the story of Arkansas. So I then went to Barnes & Noble. I knew if I was choosing something that had to be chosen in the next 10 days, that it had to either be in the public domain or I had to have a pretty good contact, personal contact, you know, for getting a novel that everybody knew, because it's always, you know, in your best interest, especially for your first opera, to pick something that has a cultural significance. And so I went to Barnes & Noble and I bought about 10 different books, and I brought them home and I read some of them, and I sent Dave and Rob an email and I said, what do you think? Which of these appeals to you? And we all agreed that The Scarlet Letter was perfect. And not only was it perfect, it wasn't the first time it was done. The first Scarlet Letter opera was written in 1897. Hawthorne's son-in-law wrote the libretto, and Walter Damrosch, who was a great conductor and composer, wrote the score. And so I knew it had been done before, but for good reason, because it's a classic and it has this great, you know, romantic triangle and great irony, and its themes of sin and society and oppression and hypocrisy and duplicity and obsessiveness and everything, you know. I mean, that's here today too. That's what makes it a classic. It just is, it speaks to every generation. And so Dave and I just agreed that that would be the perfect thing. Now, the great thing about our opera is that Dave wrote the libretto. And he's a genius. I love working with geniuses, because here's the thing. If I write some music and it's not good, which isn't going to happen, but let's say it at least you have a great libretto, you know, so you're at least giving the audience something. But as it turned out, it worked out really well. So now you're going to get...
Stepping back into the process of Scarlet Letter, once you two sort of communicated about the subject matter and making that decision about Scarlet Letter, what's that first moment like once you make that decision and you say, okay, we're moving ahead? What takes place? What comes first?
Who goes first?
Yeah. Well, this is the great thing. This is the great thing about working with Lori. She really does like to work from words, and so I get a chance to get a running start at the project and start to think about the shape of a work, and to start to think about the voice, at least the voice as I can understand it, in terms of the text. And so I reread The Scarlet Letter, and what I discovered was that as various people had said before me, this book is absolutely perfect for opera. It fell into 6 major scenes, which we've divided into 2 acts with a choral interlude. And here's the way it began to occur to me. It's right there in the book. You've got a great big opening choral number, big opening chorus, right? Hester Prynne on the scaffold. You've got various levels on the set where you've got a sort of social hierarchy established. Hester right in the middle of things on a scaffold being publicly humiliated. She's standing there holding her illegitimate daughter in her arms. The father of her illegitimate daughter is one of her accusers, you know, so you have this incredible sense of tension right off the bat. There's an opportunity for a big choral number, and I led up to a lyric that I'm very proud of for the chorus in Scene 1, Act 1, where the townspeople are singing about one law, one law, one law, as if the world really is run by and obeys one law. And when you think about the setting of the book, you understand that this is a very small island of, quote, civilization, end quote, in a giant forest, a forested continent where there is no law, beside an ocean that these people have crossed where there is no law. And so this human imposition of law in the middle of wilderness, in the middle of lawlessness, is absolutely clearly a dramatic construction that the lives of Hester Prynne and Arthur Dimmesdale are in some ways going to push against as the opera progresses. The novel then moves immediately to a jail scene where Hester confronts her estranged husband, Roger Chillingworth. And there it is. It's a natural scene. And the way Laurie has managed the music and the way she's built the music from my libretto, it's a scene of great psychological complexity because these 2 estranged people are encountering each other after years apart, and all their past and all their present emotions have to be played out in this jail scene. And then I began to think, if one of the chief problems perhaps with the Damrosch opera from a century before was that it really didn't deal with the presence of this illegitimate daughter, I began to think, what am I going to do to give Laurie an opportunity to express Hester's feelings for her daughter, Pearl? And the opportunity there is to write a lullaby for Hester to sing to her daughter. And that's the first big aria of the opera. The opera then falls into another scene years later, so I decided, how am I going to let time pass? And I wrote Laurie a choral interlude about the passage of time as it's felt in the forest, the passage of time as it's felt in the sea. And you begin to understand that this story about hypocrisy, about individual freedom versus collective guilt, about a kind of American Puritanism that imposes itself on individual consciousness in this continent, is set by Hawthorne and is set in our opera as well in a kind of sea of time, an ocean of time. Hawthorne is looking at this story from a great distance, and we have to find a way musically and dramatically to suggest that distance in time, that bridge between the 17th century and the 21st century. It has to happen dramatically and musically. So this choral interlude about time passing, which I imagine being a little bit like the interludes in Peter Grimes by Benjamin Britten, is a way of suggesting that larger scheme of things, but it's also a way of letting the audience know that time has passed in the story. So that when you see Pearl next, as a little girl, you understand that the baby you saw in Act 1, Scene 2, Act 1, Scenes 1 and 2, is now this little girl you're going to see in Act 1, Scene 3. Act 1, Scene 3 involves a major confrontation between the elders in the community and Hester Prynne. They're going to take her, they're threatening to take her daughter away from her. I guess I'm not going to really go into great detail about the libretto. I don't want to spoil the story. But it's a major dramatic moment for Hester. Act 1, Scene 4 involves a deepening of the conflict between Roger Chillingworth and Arthur Dimmesdale, in which you can see that Roger Chillingworth is really getting his claws into Arthur Dimmesdale. He's bent on revenge. He's trying to find out who the father of his estranged wife's child is, and you have this great moment when Dimmesdale is left alone. He's fevered, he's getting ill, and he wanders out into the streets and encounters a witch, Mistress Hibbins. And in fact, would you like me to read a little bit of that?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a moment. I'm going to read a tiny bit of dialogue. Dimmesdale is having his dark night of the soul. He's facing his own guilt, not only for having illegitimately fathered this child, but also for having been too cowardly to fess up to it, and for having let Hester Prynne, take the rap. And so there he is out in the middle of the street. He runs into this woman who's reputed to be a witch, and she was a historical figure, Hawthorne notes. And she says, and he says, "Good Mistress Hibbins, out so late and so alone." Mistress Hibbins says, "Good Reverend Dimmesdale, good Mistress Hibbins, everyone is good. Have I offended you? You have offended good. I do not know your meaning. You do not know yourself. I pray you, let me pass. I see a secret in your eyes. A secret bars you from yourself. You hide. Please, let me pass. From where to where on this good night? These are not solving stars. These steps do not forgive." Now she taunts him with a witch's song. "Who do you think you are? You hide behind the cloth. You hide behind the book. You cannot travel far beyond your master's wrath or leering harlot's look. The hart walks in the wood, the antler and the branch disguising what we see, the quail, the breath of wind, all stirrings of this land remain a mystery. In rituals at night, a dancing witch's fire casts shadows on the boughs. The devil seeks a mate to join him in the mire, his miserable spouse. Out where the spirit flees, where imps and demons crawl over the forest floor, no pilgrim can find peace. A wretched caterwaul, his curse forevermore. Come to the devil's fire, dance in the flames of flesh, where you and your lover tryst. Who do you think you are? I see you have been kissed. You hide your dark desire, but who, says the owl, and who, says I? Just who do you think you are?" Well, it's really fun to write this stuff.
That's a great Halloween
And so you get into Act 2, and Act 2 opens up with another confrontation with Chillingworth, and then this big love duet opens up, and you really begin to think that the lovers have a chance to escape, and then this Puritanism descends on Dimmesdale again. He just can't escape. And I'm not going to spoil the opera, but it ends with a great big choral scene again, where all the chickens come home to roost. It's just natural for opera, and it's all there in Hawthorne. So I get to write a love duet, I get to write a witch's song, I get to write a lullaby, I get to write big choral numbers. It's just great stuff.
And then I translate it into music.
Laurie, when you get the libretto
Yeah.
and you start digging into that and
Yeah.
absorbing it, understanding what he's done, do you start at the beginning?
Yes,
or
I start at the
yeah.
beginning and I go all the way through. I don't ever jump around and say, I'm going to do this aria over here, and then I'll figure out what to do, because everything is organic and everything comes from the start. So I was in New York City the night, it was February, whatever year, I can't remember the years, but I remember it was February, and I got the email of the first part of the Scarlet letter, maybe even the whole thing, I don't remember. I think it was the whole thing, and I was so excited. Had been ordering Chinese food, you know, I was like putting down whatever I wanted to eat, and then I got this email, and I turned the Chinese food list over and started writing the opening notes. You know, it just couldn't wait. So here's how I do it, okay? I take the words, I have a method, you know, that I use for everything. You know, the size of an opera is daunting. It's much larger than a song. But it's essentially the same thing, whether it's a song or it's an opera. It is a building of sound that I am making. And the building has to be secure. There's got to be a foundation, and everything has to be built on top so that it doesn't topple. And the proportions have to be right. And so whenever I'm always cognizant of trying to make beautiful singing lines that singers want to sing and that people want to hear and that I want to hear. Now, I obviously have some kind of innate gift for making a good vocal line. I don't know why I have that gift, but I do. You know, my mother was a singer, I was a flutist, whatever. I just have this natural understanding of what works well for the voice, so I'm lucky in that respect. And then what I do when I get beautiful words is I want to set the vocal line, I construct it so that the most important words in the phrase are highlighted. So even if you didn't have subtitles or whatever, you could grasp the meaning of the line just from the setting. And not only that, but I use other musical aspects to emphasize the meaning of the words. And I'm going to demonstrate some of this. So basically, I want to create a beautiful melodic line. I want to say something about it. So the opening words, over the teeming sea we sailed. And so for me, you know, I wanted to get that musical line so that it gave almost a picture of a teeming sea. So instead of a very linear line, I had da 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 da. And if you were to draw that out as a picture, just you would sort of have a bumpy sea. So that's how I got the first line. And the accompaniment is sort of rolling also. I mean, I do the accompaniment later, but with every part of my musical ideas, every musical idea stems from an interpretation of the words. What can I add? What more can I add to paint this picture, to not only make a beautiful line for the singer to communicate the words effortlessly, but to paint a picture and say something about the meaning of the words. And so, like just for example, when I got to the witch aria, you know, here you have this character. So, you know, she was considered a witch, so I'm assuming she was mentally ill in some respect. And, you know, I have her repeat a lot of words, and I have her scream, and I have her doing things that give her a specific identity. And in fact, when I was making the 1-hour version for Opera Colorado for the young artist to sing, and I had to have the witch, I only had 5 characters, and 3 of them were the main ones, and the witch was one of the other ones. And I had reassigned some of the lines to her. I thought, uh-oh, you know, I better keep her character consistent, so I better have her screaming a little bit. Otherwise it won't make any sense. So, you know, everything about the words, you know, it just goes from start to finish, and it comes out of what has gone before. And then what happens is, when I'm making a melodic line, there are motifs that come back. And it's essential in a structure as large as this to reuse your musical material. And so words get attached to notes, and then those notes take on meaning, even if you take the words away. That's what a motif is. Right? You know, I use a lot of this these recurring cells, these recurring themes to say something about the character.
All these musical themes that she's developing, which are related to the characters and related to certain dramatic elements, at the climactic moment of the opera, which just shatters me, It's as if she's untied this bag and spilled out all these melodic elements, and they just all come tearing out, all together. Everything that's been established in the previous hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes just comes roaring out. It's just beautiful.
So once you have this melody created and you're developing the harmonies and everything that go underneath it, are you hearing different instruments that then help you move towards orchestrating it?
No, not yet. And that's a great question. But I might have an idea once in a while. But really, the orchestration process is done for me afterwards. And that's a whole other layer of literal interpretation, sort of, what can I do with these instruments that will further say something about the text and what's going on with the characters. So you think, oh, well, with Chillingworth, I want something threatening, so maybe I'm going to use trombone or timpani or whatever. But the big challenge is that you're coming from 10 fingers, okay, and I have more than 10 instruments. So, of course, you don't want to just give one note to each instrument that corresponds to the piano. That would be very boring. But you have to invent. Like if you're writing for a flute part, you want to write a flute part that sounds good for the flute. And so you have to embellish and make up new lines so it becomes much more complex. And for the lullaby, you want to create a beautiful background for the voice to float over, that's lullaby-like. So that's a different process that comes later,
You mentioned repeating some of the text.
Yes.
Do you find, like, I have a musical idea and I need more words, and you
Well,
call Dave, or can I repeat these?
I did call Dave for permission, and he always gave it to me, which is very nice. Thank you. But, here's the thing. The desire to have a repetition or a refrain comes out of my interpretation of the characters. So when the elders are confronting Hester and they're saying, we want to take your kid away, she's too wild and you're not a fit parent, and she says, no, 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 I didn't think 3 no's was enough. So, I wanted a lot more no's, so I have her screaming a lot more. And then I sort of repeated that refrain because, I would be hysterical, and I just thought that it was more realistic to extend that section, and Dave was very great about that. I also had another idea that I did, and I actually took it away for this production. At the end of Act 1, Scene 3, I don't know why I thought it was a good idea, but originally I thought it was a good idea to have the chorus sing at the end of that, where, he's saying, go, you can go, Hester, take your kid, and it's okay, and we're not going to take her away. And I just thought, oh, it's so nice, so we'll have the chorus sing, go now, Hester, praying God's will be done. It sounded great with the chorus, but when I began to think about it again, I just thought dramatically it wasn't that great an idea. So that's gone. And now it's just Dimmesdale saying, go away, and she's saying, she is my child, the gift of God. And it sort of ends more sort of with the two of them singing together. So that's brand new, the end of Act 1, Scene 3. And then there were a couple of other times when I felt like, Hester really needed to repeat more. So I think it works dramatically. Like, I was so young, I did not understand. After Dimmesdale finds out that Chillingworth had been her husband, she's sort of apologizing. I was so young, I did not understand. And that comes back several times.
This is working, right? You can hear it? Okay. I would just say, my job is simply to provide an inspiration for Laurie. And she can do whatever she wants with it. Auden said about writing Libretti that words were like foot soldiers, that they're just there to be killed off by the thousands. It's the facetiousness of the librettist, it's an occupational hazard. But really, it is my job. It is my job to keep words to some kind of minimum. It's really necessary for me not to get wordy.
But within that not wordiness, I sound like Stephen Colbert here, you have so much information. This is why working with a great poet is so wonderful. There's so much, the words are so carefully chosen that there is a tremendous amount of information within a small number of words, which is ideal for me as a songwriter and as an opera composer, because the music can take that and expand on it. And you're not, you don't have to wait for a thicket of words. Everything is beautifully distilled.
Great. What is that moment like?
When he reveals himself?
No, when both of you first heard a performance or a reading or a rehearsal of all this work you did. What is that moment like? Well,
you want to speak first?
I'll just say, first of all, because Laurie mentioned that she rings me up and puts the phone on the piano and sings to me, usually that's the point at which I'm just reduced to a blubbering mass of jello. Because I'm just so moved at what she does with my words. And then when you hear other instruments come in and professional singers, not that you're not a great singer. Real singers.
I know.
What to me is amazing is, I'm a writer, and I spend most of my time alone, and I don't spend a whole lot of my life with audiences and with actors and singers, and it is so thrilling to feel this work just kind of leave. I'm no longer attached to it. I have no ego involved in it whatsoever. I feel that it's got a life of its own, and it's just amazing to see what other people do with it. And I've now heard quite a few different voices singing different arias or different bits of the opera, and it's wonderful to hear how differently they all happen.
I actually have my own microphone. Well, I guess, like Dave said, for him, the first thrill is when I sing to him. And for me, the first thrill for me is when I actually have finished like an aria. Like I remember struggling with Hester's aria, and I thought, oh, this is taking a long time. And then I sang it to my mother over the phone, and she said, "That's an aria? That's like, so how are you going to wake the baby, But Mom, it's poetic license. It's not a real baby anyway. But yes, when you hear somebody else interpret it and bring it to life, and you think, oh, that's good, I feel very proud of it. I'm very proud of myself.
We talked a lot about, whether to do a new opera on the subject of the Scarlet Letter when Laurie brought it to us, and realized that this story even, when was it published?
1850.
1850, and it's considered the first great American novel by many people, but it's still so relevant today. There's still, sort of this religious oppression among different groups, or certain people that are ostracized and kept apart from society in different parts of the world, not just America. But we thought it was just as relevant now, so it was a good story to tell.